Hi, this is Eric from Cafe Watercolor. Today we have something a little bit different. So I saw we haven't do a video on portrait painting for quite a while, so I am sharing the process of this painting. However, as you can see in the reference image, this is not a real person. This is Tifa from Final Fantasy VII. It's a video game that was released in 1997, and recently they have a remake. So this girl Tifa is one of the main character in the game, and I really like her since I was still high school when the original game was released, so I decided to paint her. The problem is this is not a real person, and even though the 3D model looks very close to a human being, the original character design is closer to a anime style character. So in the remake, even though she is a lot higher fidelity and looks a lot more like an actual human being, it still have the essence of an anime character. So rather try to copy that style one-to-one, I try to give my own iteration and try to treat her as a real person. So the finished painting is going to look different from the original source image. So anyways, in the beginning I did a very loose drawing with just fast, loose, long lines and trying to figure out the structure and basic proportion of the person. And now I'm drawing some darker marks with more confidence to set the anchor point. That's what I like to call them. Anchor point are some essential points so that when we are doing the actual painting, we have a pretty good idea where things are. So even though the drawing looks a little bit messy right now, I'm holding the pencil very lightly so I can easily erase those loose construction lines later, and only the darker lines will remain. And here I am start to erase those loose construction lines, and now you can see I have a cleaner drawing remains for me to do a painting on top. So one of the things I change is the proportion of her, because I feel the original proportion, while looking very nice for the game, is not quite realistic, as well as the face, like the structure almost non-exists. The whole face looks super smooth and the nose is really sharp. The wing of the nose is almost gone. So again, when I'm drawing this character, I try to apply what I understand from the human anatomy and the facial structure, so it looks a little bit more believable than a video game character that looks like a very pretty doll. And that's not to say the original design and the game character looks bad. It's not, it's really pretty, just that the original style is closer to an anime character. So there are certain things that they want to smooth out, and the proportion is a little bit more exaggerated and so on. So I am finishing up the drawing, and now on to the first wash. So the first wash of the face will start from the nose and outward. I leave a little bit of highlight on the nose, but the rest of it, I want to give a nice coverage. Keep it clean and transparent. That's the key of a nice looking portrait. And as you can see, when I start from the nose, it's fairly warm, and as the wash going away from the nose, it's become a little bit cooler. But what's interesting is that you can already start to see a little bit of the form popping out from the nose due to the color temperature and a slightly darker value. Now I'm pre-wetting the chest area, so I can use some dark damp mixture to do some soft transition to show the form of her breast, and also start to paint some dark underneath around her waist area, and try to connect the dark value overall. Adding a little bit of the backdrop. She is wearing white, so the white background is not going to do it. If I want to outline her silhouette, I will need to do a little bit of the background. Also finishing up the rest of the wash. Give her body some skin tone, and the rest of it I'm just going to fade it out. So now the first wash is dry. I start to paint the second wash on her face. So I'll mix a slightly more opaque value. I don't like to say dark, because when I say dark value, people start to mixing paint that is a little bit too dark. However, It's more of a more opaque mixture rather than dark. And as you can see, I paint the eyes and I connect that shape to the eyebrow and the forehead. I treat the features on the face as part of the face. One of the issues that I see in some of the students' portrait painting is that they try to outline the feature a little bit too much. So the facial feature and the face itself is not really well integrated. The features are built in the face, not a sticker sticking on top of the face. So I'm softening some edges with a clean damp brush. Some of the edges I do want them to be soft. But some of the edges, like the cheekbone right there, I do want to leave them hard edges because they suggest more structure. If we have soft edges everywhere, this portrait is going to look very mushy. So I give it a little bit of hint of shadow underneath her nose, and I'm doing her lips. And again, do not outline the lips. Make sure you have some part of the lip that fade into the skin. Now I'm adding a little bit more dark at the bridge of the nose. And also bring that value over and paint her eyebrow in. So even though I paint portrait quite different from a scenery, the idea of connecting shape never really changed when you are working with watercolor. Just that when I'm painting a portrait, I am a lot more reserved with my brushstroke. Now I'm painting a shadow. There's a cast shadow casting on her face from her hair, but I also connect that to the shadow of her jawline. Again, don't try to paint dark shadow, just less transparency. You want to keep that transparent and clean look on her skin tone. When you're painting a portrait of a young lady like her, it's important that you don't emphasize on shadow too much and you don't paint with too many brushstrokes. Too many little different contrasts and dark and too many brushstrokes is going to make the painting look noisy, and that's not going to work well with her. Now I'm painting the hair. I leave out some highlight very roughly on purpose, and I try to treat it as a simple shape rather than individual hair strand. I'm never really big on painting photorealism just because I don't have the patience, and then my day job is actually making video game art. Now, I'm not working on video game character, I'm more of a background person, but the video game that I'm working on is all about realistic detail and things looks actually photoreal. So when I'm doing watercolor, I try to stay away from that. Now I do want enough detail to look sophisticated, but I don't want too much detail in photorealism. So I'm connecting the hair shape to the black stripe and the dark area of her clothes. So again, anytime you can connect the shape, you should do that. And we can always separate them later by adding a little bit more dark. Because right now you see the painting, even though there's some contrast already, we don't have a lot of darks, especially her clothes. So we're definitely going to add some more dark later. So while we still can, just connect the shape together. Her shoulder and her arm, I try to keep them simple so that we focus on her face a little bit more. Now I'm adding just another layer of value on her face so that a couple things pops up a little bit more. So underneath her nose, maybe her cheekbone, places like that. Just adding some more intensity to the colors. I'm also adding a little bit more structure on the lower eyelid and the lip and places like that. So just a little bit hint of shadow with small shape. That goes a long way. With portrait, you actually don't need a lot to separate forms and make some forms pop. So minimalistic is the key. So I'm adding a little bit more shadow underneath her chin and a little bit on her neck. But still keeping it rather transparent. So now you can probably tell that she looked quite different from the original image. And as I stated before, I am not trying to copy the original computer graphic one-to-one. I'm trying to have my own interpretation of the character while not to deviate too much from the original design. So I'm actually quite happy with how this turned out, even though it doesn't look exactly like the video game graphic. So now I'm doing the second layer on the dark side of her clothes and also the shoulder strap and places like that. So just by adding another layer, you can start to see the form pops out a little bit more. There's a little bit more contrast and things start to look more dimensional. So this character is very important for many of the video game fans around the world. So when I'm doing this portrait, even though it's kind of me trying to give tribute to one of my favorite game and my favorite character, but there's also a lot of pressure because it's a very recognizable character, especially if you're into video game. And another thing is that people have the perception and expectation of how a certain character should look. Even though the character herself is a fictional character, people still have a perception and expectation of how she should look. So that's one of the reasons why I don't really like to paint celebrity, because I am actually not that good painting the perfect likeness, especially someone who's very recognizable to many people. So anyways, that's why I said this is my own iteration, because I'm not trying to capture likeness. Her likeness is different every single game anyway, so I'm just trying to do my take. So adding a little bit more dark on the hair, not everywhere, but places that I want her shoulder and face to pop out a little bit more. And I try to just add a little bit more sense of structure on her face without adding too much. So here right next to her cheek, her right cheek, I darken the hair just so that her face can pop out a little bit more. Adding another layer of shadow underneath her jaw, her chin, just so her face looks a little bit slimmer in a way, because if I keep the neck a little bit too light, that feels her neck is really thick, and that's probably not really flattering to look at. So I added some dark detail on her shoulder strap so that separates the form a little bit more. And her armpit, adding a little bit dark value. So at this stage, this is just some small adjustment and adding some small details. I add a little bit warm dark tone between her hair and her forehead just to have a little bit of transitioning. Her right shoulder strap is a little bit thin. Add a little bit more thickness. Now already add quite a bit of detail on her clothes. So here I'm just trying to enhance the form a little bit more. She's wearing an earring, so I add some dark to have the form pops out. But everything I do, I try to do it consciously. I don't try to add too much because this is very close to finish. And sometimes it is that you meant well, so you add a little bit more detail here and there. But as you add too much detail, the paintings start to look less fresh. So there's a fine line between a nice finished painting versus an overworked painting. And when I look at the finished painting, even though I like it, there's few marks that I feel that I shouldn't have done that, and the painting can actually look better without them. And I feel this is always the lessons that we are trying to learn as an artist, and especially a watercolor painter who's trying to paint a loose painting. So at some point when you are close to finish your painting, you should ask yourself, does this painting need this extra detail that you're about to paint, or it is better off without it? And since we're painting watercolor, a lot of things is not that easy to cover it up or just take away, not like oil and other medium. We should really think that through. So here I am just trying to wrap up this painting, adding a little bit more dark here and there. Try to make a little bit more transition tones in some of the areas and places where it needs more definition. and here is the finished painting. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you like this painting. Definitely something a little bit different than what I usually do, but I hope you enjoyed it. I'm Eric from Cafe Watercolor. I will see you again next time.